valedictorian of her high school class, and after graduation she went on to become a student at Auburn University, which was not too far from her home. She majored in psychology and criminology. Her parents bought her a very nice trailer park home in a trailer park that was popular amongst other students from her university. And she lived there alone with her dog named Peanut, who was a Yorkshire Terrier, and she loved her dog so much. He was her world. Now, Lori remained very close with her family while she was away in college, especially her mother. They spoke almost every day. In Lori's junior year of college, she met a very good friend named Lindsay Braun, and they remained friends after college as well. Now, Lori graduated in 2005 with honors. She had plans to return to school in the future to get a master's degree, but in the meanwhile, she took a job at the East Alabama Mental Health Center, and her friend Lindsay also got a job at the same place. Now let's move to the date of the crime. It was Saturday, June 10th, 2006. Lori was 24 years old at this time. She and Lindsay had plans that evening to watch a movie together and have a few drinks. Now, at 6:30 p.m., Lori spoke to Lindsay on the phone, and she said she was going to Walmart to pick up some mixers for the drinks, and then she would be over. But trash can that usually held yard supplies was also gone. The cord for the phone was gone. Now, on the same day that Lindsay went to Lori's house, Lori's mother, Arlene, had received a phone call from Lori's work telling her that her daughter hadn't showed up for 2 days, and she was on her way to Lori's house as well, in a panic. So when she got there, she basically found the same situation that Lindsay had found, and she called the police, who said, she probably just ran away or something, she'll be back. But Arlene was like, no, you don't know her, she would not leave her dog, she wouldn't run off and leave her dog behind. Something went wrong. But yet, her mother could think of no one who would want to hurt Lori. That afternoon, Arlene received a phone call from Rick Ennis, Lori's friend. And he informed her that when he had seen Lori on Saturday night, the night she went missing, she had left to go on a drug deal. That she was a drug dealer, that is. And Arlene knew her daughter well enough to know that she was no drug dealer, and she found his phone call to be very suspicious and bizarre. Meanwhile, Rick had called the police and told them the same story about the drug deal. So they headed over to Lori's trailer park and they searched her home looking for drugs, and they did not find any. Later that evening, Lori's car was found abandoned and engulfed in flames. It had been parked on a desolate dead end outside of a construction site. She was not in the car, but the fire destroyed any potential evidence that might have been found. So now everyone knew that this was not just some case of a young woman just running away. There was definitely some foul play involved here. So the investigation switched gears from being a missing person to a possible homicide. And the investigators wanted to know more about Rick Ennis because he had made that strange report, which clearly was a lie. So they spoke to Rick Ennis, and they noticed that he had a lot of scratches on his arms. And the scratches looked as if they could have been from someone like Lori fighting for her life. They searched his car and they found handcuffs, a knife, and cleaning supplies. And then they looked into his past and found something extremely unexpected and shocking. In 1993, when he was only 12 years old, he was found one evening on the side of the highway. He had been driving his parents' car and he had crashed it. So the state trooper got out and said, hey, what happened here? Where are your parents? And he said, I killed my parents. And he said it with a straight face shot in the face and then beaten with a baseball bat. After he killed his mother, he waited for his stepfather to come home, and he then shot him in the face, killing him. Now, Rick Ennis' stepfather's name was Eddie Joe Flowers. He was known as Elvis because of his sideburns and his colorful personality. Rick's mother, Dolly, was said to be very sweet and outgoing, and the couple had met in church 10 months prior to their murder. When the police asked Rick why he killed them, he said it was because he was mad that they were planning on moving and he did not want to leave his school. It also seemed as though he had killed his parents and stayed with the bodies for 2 days while he continued going to school. The investigators found what they called a to-do list written by Rick, and it seemed that he was planning on killing his 3 stepsisters next. They were already adults living independently at that time, and they were later interviewed, and they said that Rick was the exact opposite of his mother, who I mentioned earlier was sweet and outgoing. He was very quiet. When the sisters came over to the house, he would stay in his room. He would only come out to eat, and he would barely say a word to any of them. According to one of Rick's stepsisters, their father had explained Rick's personality in the following way, quote, "He's just a little different than y'all were when y'all were coming up. He just thought that they were in a new relationship and you know that he would outgrow it and things would get better over time." End quote. Rick was sent to juvenile detention for 9 years and he was released at age 21. He had been tried as a juvenile due to his age. So, even once the police found out this information about Rick's past, it was not helpful in this investigation, and they could not find enough evidence to directly link him to Lori's disappearance. So the case went cold, and Rick wound up leaving town shortly after being interviewed by the police. 10 years later, in 2016, Mark Whitaker, a special agent with the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, started a cold case unit, and he chose Lori's case as the first one that he would work on. Rick Ennis was still the prime suspect in the case. Now, this investigator started putting a lot of information together and really taking a deeper look at what was there. First of all, Rick had worked at the bowling alley. Lori's burnt car was actually found along the railroad tracks near that bowling alley. According to Mark Whitaker, the special agent, quote, "I've always thought that's what Ennis used for transportation, was walking down the railroad tracks. 'Cause it's a straight shot, you're not gonna be seen unless you want to be seen. And those railroad tracks run by Lori's house." End quote. There had also been a hand-rolled cigarette found 3 rugs that we talked about earlier that were missing, well, they turned up a few years after Lori went missing. A man who was a roommate to Rick Ennis after he left Auburn said that Rick had left these rugs behind when Rick moved out of his place. And the reason Rick moved out was because this roommate had found out about Rick having murdered his parents, and, you know, it was kind of, let's say, an argument, and it made sense for Rick to leave at that point, and he left the rugs behind. So, the police had those rugs in their possession. And the most shocking thing of all, in my opinion, was that there was an unopened envelope with the evidence. It was a report on some of the things that had been collected at the scene, and nobody opened it. So the cold case investigators obviously took a look and found out that Rick's DNA was identified in semen found on Lori's bed sheets and on blood on the interior of the front door. And his blood was found on one of the rugs that had been returned to the police. So, now, it was 12 years later, at this point, when they put all this information together, and they finally had enough to charge Rick. At this time, he was engaged to a school librarian named Alana Atkinson, and they were living in Virginia. He was designing and building portable living structures called yurts. Now, his fiancée was very supportive of Rick's innocence. She refused to believe that he had anything to do with Lori, or with Lori's disappearance or possible murder. She said she had found out on her own, actually, that Rick had murdered his parents, but that he had told her that it happened because his mother was essaying him, and he snapped. And Alana accepted this as his explanation, and she said that he was one of the most compassionate, generous, and kind people that she had ever known. And she had been in love with him for 4 years at this point. But finally, on August 6th, 2008, which was Rick Ennis' birthday, he was arrested and charged with Lori's murder, even though there was no body. Now, Rick Ennis' case was delayed for quite a while due to the COVID outbreak. So trial did not begin until April of 2022. The prosecution presented all the evidence that we've already discussed. In addition, the rolled cigarette had been tested, and it was found to have Rick's DNA. The defense claimed that that cigarette could have been planted by the police. They could have taken it from Rick's apartment and put it there. The defense also emphasized that Lori's body had never been found, so perhaps she wasn't even dead. They said she was a drug dealer who grew her own marijuana, and she was responsible for her own disappearance. Later, Lori's friend would explain that yes, she Rick's arrest in the news. Now, Lindsay Braun took the stand, and she reported that Rick was in love with Lori, but Lori did not feel the same. Shortly before Lori's disappearance, she had gotten a love letter from Rick, and she had told Lori that she was going to talk to him and tell him how she felt and that she just wanted to be friends. Now, this love letter was never recovered, so it is possible, probable maybe, that Rick took it with him that Saturday night. So Rick took the stand and he claimed that he was in a consensual sexual relationship with Lori, and that is why his DNA was found in the sheets. He did not know why his blood was found on the door. He said the scratches on his arm were from his dog. He said that Terry Booth's statement was just a complete lie, that he never even went to a bar with him. He said that the rugs that were returned to the police by his roommate were rugs that he bought at Target. They were not Lori's rugs. Ultimately, the jury found Rick Ennis guilty of capital murder. He could have received the death penalty, but Lori's mother decided that it would be okay to just give him life without parole, because she did not want to have to return to court repeatedly for all the appeals that he would definitely be filing, and this was just going to be an easier way to get closure. Sadly, though, by this time, Lori's brother had died from cancer, and her father had died from COVID, so it was just her mother, Arlene, there to get the bittersweet news that Rick would be going to prison for life. Now, at the time when Lori went missing, her mother adopted Peanut, Lori's dog, and her mother had said she had found a lot of comfort from the dog for many years. She said that the family had, quote, brought Peanut home with us, and he stayed with us until he was, I guess, about 16 years old when he died. Every time we mentioned Lori's name, he would, I don't care where he was in the house, it was like he just heard her name and he'd run in there, like, where is she? It just totally amazed me that he never forgot her, end quote. After Peanut died, Arlene got another dog named Daisy for her companion. And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some of mine. First of all, rest in peace to Lori. She was only 24 years old and she had so much life ahead of her. My heart goes out to her mother and her friends. I find it to be so sad that both her brother and her father did not live to see justice for her murder. And I can't help but wonder if the police had handled this case better. At the Should they have left the evidence report unopened? How does that even happen? Wouldn't somebody be looking for it, be waiting for it to come? I mean, that was an important report. Maybe that would have been enough to have charged him with the crime at that time. And instead, he was out there living his best life from 2006 until 2018. That is 12 years that he was just out there being totally free and thinking that he got away with it. That is just so completely unfair. Now the next question I have is, should he have ever been released from prison when he was 21 after having murdered his parents? Well, in retrospect, no. But back when he was released, nobody had a crystal ball and they didn't know he was going to go out and kill again. And that is just how the justice system works. I have to believe that he seemed like he wouldn't be a threat when they let him out. So it's just really unfortunate that he went on to kill again. I guess he didn't learn his lesson being in juvenile detention, and I guess he was not rehabilitated. Perhaps someone like him could not be rehabilitated. And then the final thing I want to talk about is his motive. Why did he kill Lori? For what? Because she did not want to be in a romantic relationship with him. Obviously that's what it was. He was not able to cope with the rejection. And I guess he's another one of those people who felt like, if I can't